Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Thursday, the 6th of July, comes to you from London. And we start by looking at the dollar index, just still on a short-term recovery here. It's fairly flat the last couple of day or so, but it is in bullish territory in the short term. But of course, we still do have quite strong resistance on the point and figure chart. And as we mentioned yesterday, we do have a new downside thrust target of about 5% off this column, and we're still playing for this 3% downside. 93 here, 94 on the dollar index. So still downside potential there, but the long-term chart is just showing possibly that we are finding some support on the lagging line. So it's too early to call that. Looking at the euro chart, we see that the euro has sort of made this long-term transition. We've talked about that. We've unwound this downside target, so that is highly significant. And we do have these upside targets of 119, 115, 118. So three upside targets does suggest that the euro is going higher in the short term, although we are below the cloud at the moment, so we just expect it to underperform the next day or so. Dollar yen is really the interesting chart in terms of what the dollar is doing. We saw on that index there's a lot of course, that's a basket, but on the dollar yen, dollar are making the transition. This is dollar strength, remember, dollar buying more yen. Dollar long-term transition underway. Medium-term transition is well underway, and the short term is bullish. And we have these upside targets in the short term, and quite a few upside targets here, medium and long term, not yet activated. But it does look that the dollar is strengthening there, so that may filter through to dollar strength against other currencies like the euro. Looking at sterling against the dollar, short term below the cloud. Just struggling to break this 130 mark, just been sitting here at this 120 level for weeks now, 129, just struggling to get through. And again, the long-term chart is still bearish, so we just need to be aware of that. Euro sterling. Sterling is up at the moment, but again, the medium and long-term charts are bearish. And against the Swiss franc, just as a proxy for looking at sterling against a number of currencies, we see much the same picture as we do with the Australian dollar, where we're bullish on sterling, weak on the Australian dollar right now. Looking at the S&P 500 index, a fairly benign day yesterday, not much change. The Nasdaq, of course, is the one that we've been watching and still quite worried about. We did bounce off the bottom yesterday. It's what I'd call a relief rally, really, and no clear signs. If we look at the daily chart, we see here this sort of engulfing pattern. But what's interesting, the great thing about cloud charts is that the lagging line just lets you see the line chart, and you can see here the head and shoulders pattern the way that you wouldn't perhaps see that in looking at the candle. And in fact, if we just go and look at that, we can just open the chart there and get an idea of what this means. So is this a head and shoulders on the Nasdaq? We take a trend line. We draw it through here. There's our rough neckline. We can just take another line here and draw that downside potential. Gives us a downside potential here of about 5,350. So Nasdaq coming back to its March-April levels potentially on that head and shoulders. So that's the rough guide, and we can see here we've got 5255 and 5399. So we've got targets on the short-term chart to about the same area. So Nasdaq is still worrying, and we need to just keep a very close eye on that. Dow is looking bullish on all three time frames. Of course, a fall in the Nasdaq of that magnitude will drag down these other indices. And the Russell 2000 is holding up, so the breadth of the market is good. This is 2,000 US stocks. So this is just showing that all across the board, the small caps, it's not just the Dow, is still looking pretty good. The S&P 500 future down very slightly this morning, and the Nasdaq down about 0.5%, so just a slight deterioration there. Maybe we'll just see the opening slightly lower, but the Nasdaq is a bit on a knife edge, and we need to keep a close eye on that. FTSE 100 bearish below the cloud with downside targets, so still looking poor short term, although we're up slightly this morning. The FTSE 250, again, we're seeing a recovery here, but below the cloud still with downside targets. And the DAX also below the cloud. So a lot of short markets looking bearish short term. The Nikkei bearish short term, even with that weaker yen. The Hang Seng also looking bearish short term, and the Shanghai Composite, the one market that is bucking the trend at the moment, with quite a lot of upside targets here. Look at that. I mean, 5 upside targets. It's rare that you see that. So lots of buying interest in the Japanese market, the Chinese market. Lots of Chinese. Every time the market falls, there's buying coming in. So that's showing some inherent strength. And we've got a 10% upside on the medium-term chart, and the long-term chart just starting to come through. So China looking better. The Sensex market also looking stronger in the short term, and the long and medium term charts are bullish. Australian market mixed. We're bearish below the cloud of the medium term chart. Short term chart we are just getting back above, but a mixed picture. Brent had a fall away yesterday, bringing us back to below the cloud. This is the beginning of the new down leg. Remember, the seasonality in the second half of the year is poor. We expect Brent to fall away. So crude oil normally suffers. Big down day yesterday. This is probably the beginning of a new down leg. Look out for a low below that 45 level, a new lower low. And although we've recovered slightly this morning, that yesterday's move has given us a new downside target of 3% to 46.90. So we expect really that we're probably going lower. And the same with WTI. We're below the cloud in the short term, medium term. That's looking fairly bearish as well. The Nasdaq. The natgas future is falling again heavily, so down at 2.87%. Back below the $3 level very convincingly, and also on the medium-term chart, that's bearish too. Copper looking bullish in the short and medium, long and medium term. The short-term chart is just turning bearish. Heating oil holding up. Coffee looking very strong on the short-term chart. We've still got a long way to go on the medium and long term, but the recovery in coffee is very strong, and cocoa is bearish on all 3 time frames. Cotton also less liquid, but also looking bullish in the short term, but the medium term is still bearish. Soybeans we're seeing, sugar we're seeing a recovery, and soybeans we're seeing a recovery in the short term as well. Wheat had a stellar run the last few days, and we're just seeing that topping out at the moment. So really difficult to call on the short-term chart, but and there are no real clear targets at the moment on that upside target. So we have to just wait for the next thrust target. Corn also having had a big run. No clear upside targets here either on the short-term charts. Looking at gold, gold is bearish below the cloud. We're just really struggling in this 1220s area. It's taken us bearish in the medium-term chart. And if we look at silver, silver making new multi-month lows, so that is quite bearish. Back to the levels really seen at the start of the year. So we're bearish on all 3 time frames on silver at the moment. Taking a look at US Treasury yields, just really hovering at this 2.34% area. So we just need to keep an eye on that. Getting through the 240 mark is the key for US rates to run higher on the 10-year. Taking a look at Apple, Apple's still just holding the floor here. It really does look like the 142 mark, the 142.50 support level is under pressure. And if Apple goes, that's a bellwether that will drag the market down. Google, we've said for some time, is the worrying chart. This is actually making new lows in line with the Nasdaq, and we've got downside targets here of 7 and 8% on Google. So that is the worrying factor at the moment in the short term. Will we find support on this long-term chart? Keep an eye out. Amazon, much the same picture. We see here that we're below the cloud of the short term. We're not making quite the new lows, finding quite strong support on this 950 area, but we just need to watch that for Amazon as well. Facebook, the 147 mark is its support level. We do have a downside target not yet activated. Lots of upside targets still in play. Facebook looking better than some of the other charts, and Microsoft looking a bit like Google, making new lows, so we've just got to be aware of that too. This Nasdaq sell-off is a little bit worrying, and unless we see some strong buying in the next few days, it's quite likely to drift lower and maybe see quite a dramatic sell-off. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.